Thanks.
Thank
So,
you.
thank you. So, just switching gears now. So, there's a piece of work that the ERIS team have been running for the last 4 years, where we've been looking at evaluating the energy, the smart local energy system projects. And Rebecca Lovell was involved in the business model evaluation of some of the and the financial evaluation of some of those projects. And we've just published some reports, which we'll share with you after the event. But Rebecca's going to talk us through some of this work.
Hi, thanks, Gordon. Yeah, hey, so I'm Becky Lovell. I'm in the business model innovation team at Energy Systems Catapult, and yeah, as Gordon said, we were doing some commercial evaluation on the PIFA projects, looking at their investability, scalability, and replicability. So if you want to know more about that, then yeah, please do have a look at our reports, which are shown on the next slide, I think, Tabitha. Yeah, so here's all three reports that we produced. So today I'm just going to be summarising the WISE-LES report, but it does pull in some of the findings from our Bills and Carbon report and our public awareness and appeal report. And next slide, please, Tabitha. And yeah, and there's also some findings in there from our previous reports on emerging business models and finance and investments for smart local energy systems. So yeah, highly encourage you to read those too. Lots of reading, I know, but worthwhile, I hope. So next slide, please, Tabitha. Yeah, so I'm not going to be covering the investability, scalability, replicability as such today. I'm going to be looking more at the technical benefits, financial benefits, and the social value of doing smart local energy systems. So there's a lot of technical benefits, which I've kind of like summarized very quickly here. But Tabitha, if you move on to the next slide, please. So the primary one is alleviating grid constraints and optimizing energy use. So I've seen in the chat a lot of people are concerned about this and how grid constraints are preventing them from rolling out renewable energy generation or things like EV chargers and heat pumps. So one of the big benefits of smart local energy systems is that you have a lot of these different assets connected together, and you overlay that with a smart control system which can kind of, stagger demand. So in the top left there, we've got an example of peak shaving. If everyone has an EV charger and they all get home from work and they put them all on to charge at the same time, we're going to really easily have a peak which outstrips the capacity of the local network. Whereas if you have a smart control system overlaying that, then you can kind of start shifting some of that demand to more off-peak times and smooth out that peak to keep things within the network capacity. Some of the PIFA projects that we evaluated, they're also looking at how to dynamically match up demand with supply. So if you've got a lot of renewable generation and it's very sunny or it's very windy, having systems which tell assets in the area like EV chargers or batteries to start charging at those times, or maybe even kind of preheating a thermal store to heat up your house later. So it's kind of avoiding curtailment and avoiding energy wastage. And the other thing that some of the PIFA projects have done is, like Piri, was to put in private wire networks. So these kind of, very literally expand the capacity of the local network by putting in extra wires. And with smart local energy systems, as I'm going to touch on in a bit, some of the business models kind of enable private investment into those private wire networks, so you can kind of get them in the ground a lot more quickly than waiting for network reinforcements from your district network operators. So can you go into the next slide, please, Tabitha? Thank you. Yeah, so by doing these things, you can optimize your energy usage and alleviate these grid constraints. And so that will allow you to install a lot more renewable energy generation than you might otherwise been allowed to by the DNO. So this really helps to kind of accelerate the deployment of low carbon technologies. And also by having these business models which incentivize people to participate in a smart local energy system, you can actually incentivize people to uptake some of these low carbon devices like electric vehicles and like heat pumps. And this is good because it allows us to decarbonize some sectors which are inherently local but quite challenging to decarbonize, like transport and buildings. So, for example, by addressing these grid constraints, you can have charging hubs installed for entire fleets of vehicles. That could be buses, it could be on municipal vehicles. And some of the projects have looked at heat networks and how they can provide lower cost heating to homes and buildings. And some of the newer networks can also do cooling as well. So that's really going to help to address decarbonisation in buildings. Next slide, please, Tabitha. Um, yeah, and the other things that smart local energy systems can do is allow you to harness the potential of the local resources that you have in your area and use them for your community's energy needs. So lots of places have different sources of waste heat. So that might be industrial processes or data centers, could be an energy from waste plant, could be mine water. And at the moment, a lot of those are going completely unutilized. That heat is all just being wasted. So smart local energy systems, put in some communal district heating, you can start actually using that heat and reducing people's heating bills. You might also have local resources of renewable electricity, so hydropower, for example, um, or potentially even sustainable biomass. So we had one project which was looking at how we can incentivize active maintenance of woodlands, which helps them with their carbon sequestration, and using that to produce heat and power as well. And very topical at the moment, smart local energy systems can also help to improve local energy security and resilience. So if you've got these better local connections between energy generators and consumers, you're less reliant on importing electricity from the national grid. So you're kind of reducing your exposure to wholesale market energy prices there. And also, if there were to be a blackout on the national grid, private wire networks can still function, and so you have greater energy resilience there. And this is especially good for more isolated communities, which may have poor grid connections, if they can be more self-sufficient using energy locally that has been produced locally. Can you move on to the next slide, please, Tabitha? Yeah, so next I'm going to talk about the financial benefits. So next slide, please. So there's a lot of financial benefits that we've seen through evaluating these PIFA projects. So the obvious one is lower energy bills. You can get cheaper electricity from renewables or from sources of waste heat, or if you can use smart systems to allow you to use more off-peak electricity from the grid, and that's obviously going to start reducing people's electricity bills. And some projects, if we've kind of taken a more holistic view and looking also at retrofit and kind of encouraging public transport options, then you start to reduce people's overall energy usage, which is great because obviously the cheapest kilowatt is the one that you never use, right? So if we can reduce energy demand as well, then that's perfect. So probably the most interesting thing about smart local energy systems is some of the new revenue streams that they start to unlock for different participants in the system. So we have the obvious ones of like sale of electricity and heat, and that doesn't necessarily just have to be limited to an energy supplier. As a local authority, you can either invest in or become a partner in what we call an energy service company, and so you can obtain a share of that revenue as well. As a local authority, you can also potentially bulk purchase low carbon technologies like EV chargers, like heat pumps, things like that, and sell them to your residents and kind of pass on any bulk discounts that you get to them. You could also lease out your land for energy infrastructure. Um, and payments for providing flexibility services is probably one of the more kind of, I hesitate to say lucrative, but it's a very important revenue stream for a lot of smart local energy systems. And those payments, like, they're not just available to the operator of the system, they can also be available to users of the system. So people who are having their EV charger controlled to charge at off-peak times, they can they can also share in the payments for flexibility. And avoided costs is also another important financial benefit of these. So by avoiding the need for network reinforcement, you're saving a lot of money there. There's also healthcare costs. So I'm going to touch on this in the social value bit in a second as well. But by decarbonising transport, you're going to be improving local air quality. By making people's homes warmer and easier to heat, you're going to be improving situations of cold and damp and mold. And so all of these things are going to help to improve public health and reduce those healthcare costs. Tabitha, can you move to the next slide, please?
Last minute, please, Bex.
Okay, cool. Right, so here's just a graph from our bills and carbon report, just kind of showing the greenhouse gas emission reductions and the energy bill savings that have been achieved by the projects. So there's been some really good results there. If we move on to the next slide, please, Tabitha, and the next one. Yeah, so lots and lots of social value to be had from smart local energy systems. So as Jodie mentioned earlier, some analysis from PwC suggested that £58 billion of investment in place-specific energy systems can unlock £825 billion of social value. So the social benefits are really, really important for this. And that could be things like, yeah, warmer, more comfortable homes and better health and well-being, improved air quality, safer, quieter roads, better access to public transport, and also just better community engagement, more local ownership and control over energy assets, and fairer access to energy resources, as well as local job creation. And can you move on to the next slide, please, Tabitha? And the next one, please. Yeah, so some key points for local authorities is that, as we found in our public awareness and appeal report, a large majority of people do want to see more investment in greener and more affordable energy supplies. There is a majority that are in support of smart local energy systems, and they're particularly interested in community benefits such as job creation. And we think that local authorities have a really important to play in this because obviously, you know, you have an enormous influence over a lot of emissions in the local area, including things like public transport, social housing, things like that. And also just you know what's best for your area, so you can really have this like tailored and targeted to address, you know, specific areas of fuel poverty and things like that. And a unique position of trust, which can help to drive engagement with these systems because it's really important to get people on board to actually participate in these things. And last slide, please, Tabitha, just very quickly. Yeah, so we believe that smart local energy systems can help you to achieve your goals by decarbonising these difficult sectors to reach your local and national net zero targets. You can address fuel poverty, improve public health. And we think that some of these new revenue streams and the new business models that have been created enable external investment into these public energy infrastructure projects, which is good because that means you don't have to rely so heavily on government funding to get these off the ground. And just a final point there on how collaboration is really, really key. You know, nobody can do this alone. Nobody should keep trying to reinvent the wheel by themselves. People really need to kind of look at other projects. What are they doing? What's worked well? And try and, if it's possible, replicate that in your area if it's suitable. And yeah, just really try to partner up with commercial entities who have this expertise. You know, companies like Equans who can help operate these kinds of systems. Sorry, I had to whip through that really quickly. But
No, thanks, Becky. And sorry for pushing you. We're just
no,
running out
no.
of time. That's all. We've
Yeah.
got one more speaker to come in. But thank you very much for that. Very, very useful, helpful insight. The reports will be shared, but it just gives that insight into how we can get these sort of projects going without the need necessarily for government funding. But if we do get government funding, we can do more.